Let's welcome to the show Trump economic advisor Steve Moore and National Taxpayers Union Executive Vice President Brendan Arnold. So, Steve, I want to start with you on this. The fees being charged to the U.S. companies and the U.S. military to use that canal is what set off for the president-elect. Is Panama taking advantage of the U.S.?
It sure seems like they do. I mean, I remember, by the way, when the whole issue of who was going to have ownership of the Panama Canal was, I think it was when Jimmy Carter was president back, over 40 years ago. But the provisions of this deal do say, as the president said, that we need to be treated fairly because it was American workers and American money, American know-how that built the canal in the first place. And so I think Trump does have a strong leg. And I'll say one other thing, Edward. Having worked around Trump and with him in the past, this is a guy who doesn't back down. And I think that the end result of this is going to be that Panama is going to have to make a deal with the U.S. and our shippers will face lower fees for using the canal.
Yeah, we'll see. So, Brandon, I want you to listen to President-elect Trump on Panama and regaining control of the canal. Listen to this.
But it's falling into the wrong hands. It was not given for the benefit of others by a token of cooperation, but it was given to Panama and to the people of Panama, but it has provisions. You got to treat us fairly, and they haven't treated us fairly. If the principles, both moral and legal, of this magnanimous gesture of giving are not followed, then we will demand that the Panama Canal be returned to the United States of America in full, quickly, and without question. I'm not going to stand for it.
So, Brandon, is this a legitimate concern? One, about the fees, and two, about the Chinese influence?
Yeah, I think yes on both fronts. The fees charged to ships going through the canal can be as high as $300,000. They're sometimes much lower, or even a few bucks. But $300,000, guess who's paying that amount? Of course, the shippers, who then pass it on to American businesses and American consumers. So anything we can do to drive down those fees, I think, is a positive as we still try to get out of this nightmare of inflation we've been experiencing for several years now. And I would say Panama also made a strategic mistake back in 2017 when it was one of the first countries to join China's Belt and Road Initiative. Obviously, aligning itself with China is a bad idea anytime, but particularly under a Trump presidency, it's going to create some tension for the United States and Panama. And we are the most important country when it comes to commerce and when it comes to national security to Panama.
So, Steve, I want to ask you, how would you go about taking over control of the Panama Canal, knowing the president-elect, this fight might involve tariffs or economic pressure, to change the fees at least, right?
I don't think it's going to come to that, Edward. I think it will be a negotiation. And Trump's a very good negotiator, as we all know. And so I think we are going to see, and Brandon is right, that these fees that are being charged are really outrageous to American shippers. And Brandon is also right that this raises the price of the goods and services that we buy as Americans. But no, I don't think the U.S. will take back control of the canal, because I think the Panama is going to blink. By the way, he's making the same demands on Canada. You mentioned Greenland. What about Canada? He's calling Trudeau the governor of Canada. So this guy plays hardball.
He does. Yeah, when Canada seems to be cooperating, at least I talked to Tom Homan yesterday. They seem to be cooperating, at least on the immigration front. So, Brandon, I want to ask you this. Could this be another reason the president-elect is floating that 15% corporate tax rate? So if companies manufacture here in the U.S., it reduces the need to go through the canal, right?
Yeah, probably so. I mean, when you have a 15% corporate rate, then we're below the average of industrialized nations. So we have less of an incentive for our country or our companies to relocate elsewhere. We'd produce more. We'd engage in more commerce domestically. So all those things would be good. They would lessen the importance of international commerce. But listen, at the end of the day, we're always going to be participating in international commerce. Free trade is always going to be important to this country. So we should preserve those relationships while making our country as attractive to investors domestically and internationally as we possibly can.
And we know from the first administration, the president-elect does like those free trade agreements one-on-one with countries. So now we've got Canada, Mexico, Panama. The list keeps growing as he's getting into office. Steve Moore, Brendan Arnold, thank you. We're going to follow this story. We'll get back with you. We'll see you again on it. Appreciate it, guys.
Thanks, Edward.
So now to this.